Declassified. I'm Nathaniel Sheppard, your host on behalf of author Daniel P. Douglas. In this series, we reveal real Cold War secrets and excavate the classified details your government hoped you'd never discover. And here we go. Operation Garden Plot, when your government plans for war against you. The military blueprint for controlling American cities that never really ended. It was October 1967 and Detroit was still smoldering. Just 3 months earlier, police had raided a celebration for returning Vietnam veterans, sparking 5 days of uprising that left 43 dead and 2,000 buildings destroyed. The 82nd Airborne had patrolled American streets with tanks and machine guns, the first federal military deployment against civilians since the Civil War. While America reeled from seeing paratroopers occupying an American city, Pentagon planners were taking notes, not on what went wrong, but on how to do it better next time. Within months, they had a name for their new project, Operation Garden Plot, because apparently someone thought planning military occupation of American cities deserved a name that sounded like a community gardening initiative. This wasn't a contingency plan gathering dust in some forgotten filing cabinet. This was an active, evolving blueprint for deploying the United States military against its own citizens. A blueprint that, disturbingly, reads less like history and more like today's headlines. The architecture of domestic military control. Operation Garden Plot emerged from a simple premise. Civil unrest in America had become complex enough to require military solutions. The year 1968 saw riots following Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, massive anti-war protests, and cities burning from Newark to Washington. The government's response? Create a standardized playbook for military deployment on American soil. The plan was breathtakingly comprehensive. It detailed which military units to deploy for specific scenarios, command structures that bypassed normal civilian oversight, intelligence gathering protocols for American citizens, detention procedures for mass arrests, and coordination frameworks between military and civilian law enforcement. This wasn't theoretical. Garden Plot created the administrative infrastructure for martial law, complete with forms, procedures, and training programs. They literally bureaucratized the suspension of civil liberties. When theory became practice, Garden Plot wasn't an academic exercise. Throughout its official existence, the military activated these protocols repeatedly. The 1992 Los Angeles riots saw the deployment of 10,000 National Guard troops and 3,500 federal troops. Garden Plot's procedures guided everything from initial deployment to rules of engagement. Soldiers patrolled American streets using tactics refined through decades of planning. Hurricane Hugo, 1989, provided cover for testing Garden Plot's coordination mechanisms. While ostensibly providing disaster relief, military units practiced urban control techniques and civilian population management. The 1971 May Day protests witnessed the largest mass arrests in U.S. history. Over 12,000 people detained. Garden Plot's detention protocols proved so efficient that they overwhelmed the court system. Most arrests were later ruled unconstitutional, but the procedures remained in place. Each activation served as a real-world training exercise, refining the machinery of domestic military deployment. The technical precision of democratic erosion. What made Garden Plot particularly insidious was its bureaucratic banality. This wasn't a dramatic coup plot. It was administrative preparation for authoritarian control. The planners created standardized forms for requesting military intervention. They established liaison protocols that sounds benign but effectively merged military and civilian law enforcement. They developed intelligence sharing agreements that turned soldiers into domestic spies. Most chilling, they created legal frameworks that made the unconstitutional appear routine. Suspending posse comitatus, the law preventing military from acting as domestic police, became a matter of checking the right boxes on the right forms. Rex 84, when Garden Plot got steroids. In 1984, Garden Plot spawned an even more ambitious offspring, REX 84, Readiness Exercise 1984. This exercise simulated rounding up 400,000 refugees, but the infrastructure it tested could handle any population deemed problematic. REX 84 revealed Garden Plot's true scope included suspension of the Constitution under various scenarios, detention camps for American citizens, military tribunals replacing civilian courts, and censorship and communication blackouts. Oliver North, of Iran-Contra fame, helped design these exercises. When questioned during congressional hearings, the topic was deemed too sensitive for public discussion. Democracy, apparently, couldn't handle the truth about its own contingency plans. The infrastructure that survived. Officially, Operation Garden Plot ended in the 1990s, replaced by newer directives with friendlier names. But here's the thing about infrastructure, physical or administrative, once built, it rarely disappears. The fusion centers monitoring American citizens, Garden Plot architecture, the military equipment flowing to police departments, Garden Plot legacy, the joint training exercises between soldiers and cops, Garden Plot methodology, the normalization of military responses to civilian issues, pure Garden Plot. Today's Garden, Marines in LA, National Guard in Florida, military in DC. Fast forward to 2025. Marines patrol Los Angeles subway stations. The National Guard deploys to Florida for crime prevention. And now, military units position themselves in Washington, D.C., not for any specific threat, but as a normalized security presence in the nation's capital. Each deployment follows patterns established by Garden Plot, vague missions, indefinite timelines, gradual normalization. They don't call it Garden Plot anymore. Now it's civil support operations or domestic security assistance. The names changed. The playbook didn't. When Marines rode LA's subways, they weren't preventing any specific threat. They were normalizing military presence in civilian spaces, exactly as Garden Plot intended. The operation succeeded not by preventing crime, but by making armed soldiers in American cities seem routine. Florida's National Guard deployment represents Garden Plot's evolution, deployed for crime prevention, not response, prevention. They've made military solutions to civilian problems standard operating procedure. The DC deployment adds another layer. Military forces in the capital normalize the visual of American democracy under armed guard. What was once unthinkable, soldiers patrolling the symbols of civilian government, becomes another Tuesday. The infrastructure Garden Plot built makes this feel normal, even necessary. The pattern we can't unsee. After decades of refinement, the Garden Plot template follows a predictable pattern. Identify the crisis, crime statistics, civil unrest, natural disasters, Any justification works. Deploy military assets, always with reassuring language about supporting civilian authorities. Expand the mission. Scope creep isn't accidental, it's architectural. Normalize the presence, make withdrawal politically impossible, and institutionalize the deployment. Create precedent for next time. Each cycle makes the next deployment easier, the public resistance weaker, the constitutional concerns quieter. The quiet death of Posse Comitatus. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 was supposed to prevent what Garden Plot perfected, using the military as domestic law enforcement. But Garden Plot's genius was creating exceptions that swallowed the rule. Through careful bureaucratic erosion, supporting civilian authorities became active policing. Temporary deployments became indefinite presence. Emergency responses became routine operations. Limited missions became expansive mandates. Garden Plot didn't repeal Posse Comitatus. It made it irrelevant through procedure. Why this matters right now. Every military deployment on American soil strengthens precedent. Every normalized presence makes the next one easier. Every bureaucratic innovation in civil-military cooperation adds another brick to Garden Plot's foundation. We're not sliding toward militarized law enforcement. We've arrived. Garden Plot drew the blueprint. We're living in the building. The genius of Garden Plot wasn't planning for martial law. It was making martial law unnecessary by normalizing military control through administrative means. Why suspend the Constitution when you can achieve the same effect through proper procedures? The documents tell the story. Declassified Garden Plot documents read like dystopian fiction. Meetings where officials discussed population control measures, memos about detention facilities for civil disturbances, training manuals for cordon and search operations in American cities. They documented everything because they saw nothing wrong with it. In their minds, they were protecting democracy by planning its suspension. They were preserving freedom by preparing to eliminate it. The cognitive dissonance would be funny if it weren't so terrifying. The harvest of the garden. They called it Garden Plot because they were planting seeds. Today, we're living in their harvest. Military units trained for domestic deployment. Legal frameworks enabling constitutional suspension. Public acceptance of soldiers as law enforcement. Infrastructure treating citizens as potential enemies. The seed sprouted exactly as planned. The garden grew, and many Americans don't even realize they're living in it. The call to recognition. Next time you see military vehicles on American streets, remember, this isn't an emergency response. It's a well-rehearsed performance following a script written in 1968. When politicians deploy troops for public safety, they're not innovating, they're implementing. When military units patrol civilian spaces, they're not adapting, they're executing decades-old plans. Operation Garden Plot succeeded beyond its planners' wildest dreams, not by preventing unrest, but by making military control feel normal, necessary, even comforting to some. The verdict. In the end, Garden Plot represents the moment American democracy began eating itself, when military solutions to civilian problems became standard procedure, when constitutional protections became administrative obstacles, when emergency became permanent. The infrastructure remains. The procedures persist. The mindset endures. They planned for war against their own citizens with the same methodical precision used for foreign invasions. They filed it properly, trained for it regularly, refined it constantly, and they bet correctly that we'd be too distracted, too divided, or too defeated to notice when they started implementing it. Welcome to the garden. It's been growing for 57 years. And there it is, another documented descent into the declassified, filed properly, stamped accordingly, and revealed at last. I'm Nathaniel Sheppard, your host on behalf of author Daniel P. Douglas. Thank you for listening.